what's interesting is that the people who now argue most strongly that we should stay in the European Union are, pretty much without exception, the same people who said we should join the euro. And they're using exactly the same flawed logic without the slightest hint that they got it wrong last time. And if these were forecasters in the private sector, they'd all be out of work now.
I want to get your take on this whole debate over the euro, what we've seen happening in Greece. What kind of skepticism or discussion has that caused in the broader European community?
It's a good question. Greece has really delegitimized a large chunk of the European project. When the euro was launched, we were told two things. We were told it will make everybody richer. All the participating countries, we were told, the official report by the European Commission said they will all add 1% of GDP growth every year in perpetuity, simply by joining the euro. Well, that has, to put it as neutrally as I can, that has not fulfilled expectations. And they were also told, peoples of Europe were told, it'll make everyone get on better. It'll reduce national animosity as well. Look at the way Greece now talks about Germany and vice versa. I mean, it is plainly not fulfilled its objectives. What we can see is that the authors of the euro are prepared to inflict on Greece and on a number of the other participating countries in southern Europe endless poverty and emigration, rather than admit they made a mistake. And at the same time to inflict endless IOUs and tax rises on the rest of the Eurozone to bail them out.
Well, that's right. I mean, because the money that Greece is getting isn't coming from Greece at this point, obviously. They don't have any more money. And as Margaret Thatcher once said, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. That really seems to be what's happening here. Do the Germans understand that? Do the other members of the European community understand that?
The Germans absolutely understand that it's their money, and they are understandably cross about this, because from their point of view, all they have done is shell out, and all they've got in return is insults and being done up in swastikas and so on. You can't fail to see it from their perspective. At the same time, from the perspective of the Greeks, they never got the loans in the first place. They can see money that is going from European taxpayers to French and German banks, but leaving them with the responsibility for the repayment. So you can understand why they equally are upset about it.
So what does this mean in the long term? I mean, do you start over? Do you say we made a mistake? That might be what you'd like to say.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, that would be the obvious thing to say, you know what, this didn't work out the way we thought. We did it in good faith, but actually it has not increased the prosperity of the participating countries. Maybe it is time to look for an orderly, managed way of dismantling the monetary union and allowing each country to pursue a monetary policy dictated by its own conditions and needs. But of course, doing that would mean not only admitting a mistake, which nobody likes to do, it would mean calling into question the irreversibility of the European project. And rather than do that, they are prepared, with this cruelty, there's no other word for it, to inflict immiseration on hundreds of millions of people.
What is the attitude in the UK about this issue?
Well, I mean, the euro has disappeared. There is really nobody now in the UK, apart from Richard Branson, eccentrically, who still says we should. And I think maybe Tony Blair. I think they may be literally the only two people in the country who still think that we should join the euro. But what's interesting is that the people who now argue most strongly that we should stay in the European Union are, pretty much without exception, the same people who said we should join the euro. And they're using exactly the same flawed logic without the slightest hint that they got it wrong last time. And if these were forecasters in the private sector, they'd all be out of work now.
Well, of course, the story we've been following closely in this country, because of a country defaulting is a huge story no matter where the country is, but also many of the policies we saw them following in Greece, we have followed in this country. We just have a larger economy and more money that we can print and borrow, but eventually we may end up in the same place if we don't get it turned around.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in one sense, you share your currency with other countries because they've unilaterally adopted it, but you don't share your monetary policy with other countries. And I think it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that had Greece not been in the euro, the crisis would not nearly have been so severe. I mean, of course, there would have still been a debt issue that there was in Britain, there was in Hungary, and I mean, there was a general problem. But had Greece not been in the single currency, the markets would have stepped in and imposed their own corrective 5 or 6 years ago. And then when the crash came, it would not have been nearly so severe because Greece could have devalued priced its way back into the market and bought itself time to make the painful restructuring decisions that it's had to make. It wasn't able to do that because it's in the euro. So it's not the same situation that you have or that we have. Despite everything, I mean, I was looking up the figures. Under the presidency of Barack Obama, who has not been the most pro-enterprise president, if I can again put it mildly, nonetheless, this country has seen cumulative growth of 9.4%. Why? Because basically entrepreneurs are always several steps ahead of government
policy. Thank goodness, right?
Right, and therefore the country remains solvent and prosperous. That is in marked contrast to the Eurozone, which over the same period has shrunk by 1.2%. Right? That's over the last 7 years. That is an extraordinary statement if you think about what should normally be happening, what's happening in every other part of the world. And it's difficult to divorce that record of stagnation and recession from the fact of the single currency.